Have you taken any time to reflect upon the possibility that comparing your political rivals to murderous terrorists might put their lives in danger at a time when hate crimes are on the rise? Or do you just don't care?
So Reverend Sharpton, I don't look at the world through political parties. Frankly, it's good to see it's been 20 years since we last spoke. And part of the reason that I came to that event 20 years ago with you is that you were a political outsider just like I am in my own party. But let me talk about the issue you're actually asking about, which is that, you know what's toxic about that old worldview of organizations like the KKK, which have been a god-awful stain on our national history, is that they say that your skin color determines what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to think. To say you have to shut up, sit down, and do as you're told because you're black or...
All right, so let's dive right into it. Imagine this. Vivek Ramaswamy and Al Sharpton head-to-head in a heated debate that shook the political landscape. Seriously, it was intense, and it unfolded like one of those epic battles where ideology meets relentless passion. Ramaswamy didn't hold back, no way. He went all in, challenging the very core of Sharpton's narrative on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ramaswamy boldly criticized identity politics and championed school choice as the real pathway for addressing racial disparities. Meanwhile, Sharpton, well, he resorted to his usual stance, clinging to systemic racism tales. You know, it's debates like these that make us question, who really stands for the people? If you're outraged or intrigued, there's more where that came from. Hit that subscribe button, make my day seriously, and join our community. I'm aiming for 1,000 subscribers by the end of February, and every single one of you counts. Let's keep exploring these critical issues together. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of what really went down during the Ramaswamy versus Sharpton face-off. You know, this was not just any debate, it was a full-on wrestle for the moral high ground, and I'll tell you, it had us all on the edge of our seats. The discussion kicked off with Ramaswamy taking a clear shot at Al Sharpton's beloved DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies.
Companies, DEI, diversity. I would hope we can agree that historically many communities of color have not enjoyed the same socio-economic benefits as white Americans, and many of those disparities persist to this day. What specifically would you do as president to address that problem, keeping in mind your own company got diversity business?
Yeah, so I want to be very clear about that. After I stepped down as CEO, precisely to speak my mind freely, the company that I founded went the direction of most companies in corporate America. And I disagree with that decision. But you're asking a more important question about what are we going to do to ensure equality of opportunity in this country. You're right. We have been an imperfect nation. I've always said it. But we aspire towards perfection. How do we go that next step? I want to make sure kids aren't trapped in the ghetto of a zip code that they happen to be born in. To the contrary, I think every parent deserves to have the opportunity to send their kids to the best possible school. That's why I favor radical school choice in this country. I think it's a mystery, Reverend Sharpton. The very people who will wax eloquent about systemic racism are also the ones who are opposed to educational mobility. That's why I've said shut down the U.S. Department of Education. Use that $80 billion. Put it in the hands of parents so they can actually send their kids to that best possible school they can. That's the actual civil rights issue.
He pointed out how these policies, which Sharpton and folks like him are always touting, don't actually address the root causes of racial disparities. Instead, Ramaswamy argues, they just perpetuate the victimhood mentality, and honestly, he's got a point, right? I mean, does it really make sense to keep dwelling on the past rather than moving forward? Ramaswamy made it clear that if we're going to make real progress, we have to look at the real issues. He brought up the importance of education, and it was like, boom, right there in Sharpton's face. Ramaswamy's proposal seemed radical at first. He advocated for closing down the U.S. Department of Education, taking that $80 billion budget, and using it to empower parents with school choice. Imagine that, folks, using government money to actually benefit American families for a change, so every kid has the chance to get an amazing education, regardless of their zip code. Sharpton predictably pushed back, hanging on to the narrative of systemic racism as the ultimate barrier. But you see, Ramaswamy wasn't letting him off easy. He accused Sharpton's approach of doing little more than stirring the pot of division, without offering up any real solutions to the issues communities face every day. It's a bold claim, sure, but one that really resonates with those of us tired of the same old rhetoric. And then, there it was, the moment where Ramaswamy tackled the conspiracy theories angle. Now, this is usually that awkward moment where things get a bit uncomfortable, right? But, you know, it didn't faze him at all. When questioned about the infamous Obama birther conspiracy, and mind you, this is a favorite distraction for the left, Ramaswamy simply dismissed it.
Let me ask you one last question. We're out of time.
And that's how we unite this
country.
country.
One thing we have in common with Trump is you've been criticized for trafficking in conspiracy theories. So here goes, do you believe, let me ask you this, because you and Trump have both been accused of trafficking conspiracy theories. Do you believe Barack Obama was born in the United States, and do you think it was appropriate for Trump to suggest to otherwise, even as evidence mounted, that the claim was a lie?
I think I have every reason to believe Obama was born in the U.S., and I have never brought up that issue, and I have no idea why we're actually discussing that. But what I have talked about is, for example, Saudi Arabia was absolutely involved in 9/11, despite the fact that our government refused to acknowledge it. That COVID-19 did originate in a lab in China, despite the fact that our government called that a conspiracy theory. That we still haven't seen the transgender shooter manifesto out of Nashville. So those aren't conspiracy theories. Those are conspiracy.
Instead, he drew attention to what's not getting covered, pointing fingers at things like the Saudi involvement in 9/11 and the origins of COVID-19 in a Chinese lab, labeling these as conspiracy realities rather than theories. This approach completely outsmarted any attempt to peg him down as a conspiracy nut. What's more, it showed a side of Ramaswamy that's all about focusing on the truth, rather than just playing into the frenzy of media narratives. He challenged the mainstream viewpoint with facts, urging people to look beyond the smoke and mirrors. Sharpton, meanwhile, seemed a bit caught off guard. You could almost see the unease when faced with those hard-hitting issues that he really couldn't counter with his usual repertoire. It was almost like watching someone try to backtrack, you know? Throughout the debate, Ramaswamy highlighted how the narratives being pushed by politically driven organizations only seem to keep Americans divided, almost intentionally. He emphasized the need for hearing different perspectives and encouraged open dialogue as opposed to fear-driven arguments. You could say Ramaswamy's approach was a call to replace entitlement and identity politics with personal responsibility and a merit-based opportunity system. It's a fresh perspective that resonates with those who believe it's time for America to embrace the possibilities of the future rather than being bogged down by the inequities of the past. It became clearer as the debate went on how Ramaswamy's angles played into the frustration many feel with traditional and divisive political figures, especially the likes of Sharpton, who are viewed by some as more interested in preserving their own platforms of influence rather than actually improving anyone's lives. The debate wasn't just a comparison of two different political ideologies, but a vivid illustration of what it means to challenge an entrenched system. Sharpton, representing a tried and tested narrative and approach that hasn't always delivered results, and Ramaswamy with a fresh, almost audacious stance, aiming to reshape how we look at issues that have long plagued society. Towards the end, both men held their ground, but the narrative that emerged was one of skepticism towards the status quo and a yearning for solutions that actually put power back in the hands of ordinary people. So, it begs the question, are we ready to embrace change? Or do we cling to familiar narratives simply because they're easy and comfortable? And what about you guys? What are your thoughts on this confrontation between Ramaswamy and Sharpton? Let us know down in the comments. Seriously, I'm eager to see what you all think about these issues.